All right. Good
Recording
morning.
in progress.
Perfect. All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. I'm Jaime. I'm a design advocate at Sketch. Today, we're going to be talking about how to maintain and grow and scale your design systems. It's 7:30 for most of you, so make sure you have a coffee and let's make it easy so we can start the day, nicely. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll leave about 5 minutes at the end of the talk to answer your questions. So good. Well, I think without further ado, let's get started, right? All right. So I'm sharing here my desktop, and you should be able to see what I'm seeing, right? So today we're going to be talking about best practices when creating and maintaining a design system, and also how to scale it. As I mentioned, right, I am Jaime Crixams, a design advocate here at Sketch, and you can reach out to me at jaime@sketch.com. I am in Madrid, Spain, so to me it's not that early. It's 4:30 p.m., so I had my coffee a while ago, but has a little bit of a background. I've been a designer, a UX designer for, I don't know, 20 years almost now. I have been a front-end developer, product manager. I have worked with big, large organizations, very small startups, and all kinds of business. And I've seen this field grow, got born and how it grows through the years. So for a couple of that past couple of years, I've been, working in Sketch, kind of promoting best practices, how to make the best use of Sketch, how to manage design system, talking with companies of big size, all sizes, honestly, and how to manage their design teams and how to make the best and how to make it easy to, grow and scale a product or, working in an agency, multiple clients, and so. So today we're going to be doing a quick refresher on design systems, kind of like, to dust it off. And for those who haven't had the chance to, create or manage a design system, kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Then we're going to be talking about how to organize a design system so that I can scale, so they can be, healthy. We're going to talk about how to maintain it as well. So how to, do some tasks that is going to help us, keep it nice and healthy. And then how to scale, right? As your product scales, as you get more clients, you're probably going to need to add more things. And so how do we do that in a way that makes sense? So let's do a quick refresher. Let's get started. Design systems, right? Design system is basically an agreement, right? An agreement that will help create a sense of consistency and familiarity in all the UIs that you create. But it's also a place for agreement between not only the design team, but also the development team and product owners and business and even marketing, right? So it's a place where all different areas of the company can, set the time or agree in a series of rules, in a series of styles that will create a consistent experience for your users in whatever product or, website or whatever it is that you guys are doing, right? It's essential for creating a cohesive and scalable product, right? To growing things, to creating more screens. It's going to be the one source of truth and agreement for everybody. It provides consistency, reliability, but overall, I think that the best is that it makes work much, much faster. It allows everyone to iterate faster. It allows everyone to understand what's going on. It makes the dev teams work easier, right? And if you don't have one, your team might struggle on how to, what to deliver and what to do. So that's design systems. And let's move on, right? There are like a few approaches for design to create a design system. The most known one, it's definitely the atomic design model, right? And that's probably the one that I prefer. When you start creating the most basic tokens, and from there you can create your atoms, molecules, right? Your templates, and then your final pages, right? Or screens. So with that, you create like very basic things. So you can define colors, for example, can be basic tokens, even smaller than atoms. From there, you can decide like, a H1 title, H2 title, a paragraph, right? Or the shadows or the borders and the rounded corners and the spacing. Those elements might help create then a basic element. So you have those atoms, you kind of put them together, you have a little title, right? Or you have a little, input text, you put them in a little box that has the style of a text field, and you have a little icon with a little loop, and that becomes your first little molecule, right? Combining those three atoms, and you have a little search box. That little search box can go into a header where you add some other atoms you might put, or some other molecules, sorry. You can put the molecule that you have for the menu, or you have a list of links, you might have your logo, right? And that creates a little header, and that header then becomes a little template that you can use and reuse in the different pages. That's atomic design. There's a couple of few others, right? Some teams start with something more like generic guidelines, and those guidelines can be for, again, styles of text, styles of layering, defining shadows, defining the colors that you're using, just setting those basic ground rules without getting too much in depth into creating components that you're going to reuse, that you're going to have variants on, right? And then you have, something like BEM, right, which is a block element modifier. So you create little blocks or little components, right? They are made of different elements, and that they can be, inside of it. And then you have modifiers that might modify. So for example, like the light theme version, the dark theme version, or the desktop version and the mobile version, right? So that's closer to front-end development, but it's also very much used when it comes to design systems. So let's set a solid foundation. How do we organize a design system, right? And for that, I would recommend going bottoms up, pretty much what I've been talking about. Creating those basic tokens, going from creating styles, right? So your paragraphs, titles, captions, your shadows, paddings, spacings, the different, to then something a little bit higher, like buttons and applying colors. And then from there, you start growing and creating more complex things. You start nesting your own components that you have created. You start applying the styles that you have created into those components. So you can then create headers, footers, or cards of information, right? And those cards then can be used and reused in the many screens that your product, your app might have. So following that, bottoms up approach, I'm going to give you a series of tips, right, that makes this process easier. So one of the things is separating styles from symbols, right? And I want to, in a sketch, we do it very easily. You have a components view, and in that components view, you have your symbols, and you have your text styles, layer styles, you have your templates, and you have your color variables as well. So it's sometimes we make the mistake that we start creating like, okay, I have a little button, right? And this button is going to have the primary button is going to be my primary color. And then I'm going to create, so I'm going and create a little rectangle, right? And then I apply the color without using the color variable, right? And I apply the text without using the text style, right? And then I create a secondary one and a tertiary one, maybe a disable state or a hover state. And I start changing those colors and applying the different design elements that go in it without using styles. So what happens there is that, further along the line, you need to change the color of your brand because, there's a rebranding and you need to change the color. Now you have to get into every component and change that color. If you will have used your color variables in one change, you change everything, right? If you will have used your textiles and you change this typography or font sizes, one switch applies everywhere. So keeping this separate, the styles, and try to use the styles as much as you can. So keeping them separate from symbols is going to be really helpful as you grow and scale a design system. So just as a tidbit, make sure that your symbols are the elements in your UI. They are the buttons, the fields, the cards, all those elements, and the styles determine how these things look. Right? So what typography are we using? What colors are we using? What shadows do we have? What spacing rules should we follow? Right? And kind of went ahead and spoiled the next one. Rely on those styles, right? Use them as much as you can. Whenever you can use a style, use a style. When you're using styles, it tends to be it hits a lot less the processing power of whatever design tool you're using. And it makes the process a lot easier to update because you can update across multiple types of components, right? So like that example of changing color, if I'm changing my primary color, it will change it on the titles, and it will change it on the buttons, and it will change it on the footer, right? By just changing one color variable that I've been using in the different components. So rely on styles as much as you can. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Then I want to get into probably the more complex bit of creating a design system, which is dimensions. How do you categorize and organize your design system so that it's, scalable and it can group the right components together, right? So you can think of multiple dimensions of it. You have devices, right? So you can separate by desktop and mobile and tablets. You could have by theme. You can have a light theme, a dark theme. You can separate by brand. You might have brand 1, brand 2, brand 3, right? And they may have different colors and so. And you might separate by types of component. So you might have your cards in one side, your form fields in some other place, right? And your, I don't know, titles in some other place, paragraphs in some other, right? And so you see, there are many dimensions that start crossing together here. What is the best approach on this, right? So the first of all is try to understand it. What dimensions do you need to address, right? What viewport sizes, what types of components, what are the relationship between them, and document it. If documentation is going to be something I'm going to be mentioning a lot throughout the talk, because the thing is that 6 months from now, when you've made your decision and you did the really hard work of understanding and then dividing those dimensions, and then you want to revisit it, you might not remember the reason why you did things. So document, and it's going to help a lot. You and your team, new members, when they join in, if they have the reason behind. So what dimensions do we usually recommend? So I will say that it's the approach that I've seen many companies take is probably preferable to go device agnostic, right? And let me talk to that we have, our first and desktop and tablet. That makes creating the final designs really easy, because if I'm making a desktop screen, right, I can go to my desktop components and then I can search for the component I want and put it in. And I'm sure that I'm bringing in the really easy. However, since the design is the one that kind of like, gives inheritance to everything else. Everybody uses the design system. Now, if I want to update a card, right? We have a card for a tablet version. Now we will need to go to the desktop, find that card, update it with whatever update we might do. Then we need to go to the mobile. Then we need to go to take care of our devices, and you start organizing by type of component. It makes it a lot easier. You have your cards together, and you have your input fields together, and you have your text or your titles together. You have your buttons together. Then it becomes a lot easier, because once you go inside that, you go into that card and you say, okay, I have here the desktop, the mobile, and the tablet version. I make one update, and I can quickly update or make that same update in the different other devices. So makes it a little bit harder when you're then creating that final screen. When you have that final screen, now you are creating a desktop screen, and now you need to find the card, and then you need to pick the desktop one, right? So it becomes a little bit more cumbersome there, but the trade-off is way better, especially to scale a design system to make the right updates to all the components in all the devices at once. It's better to go with a device agnostic approach. And if you have any questions, remember, you can, just put them in the chat and I'll take a look later. All right. So the next one is try to make that hierarchy of components as flat as you can make it. That's really hard, right? I would recommend that you go with the Boy Scout approach here, right? And the Boy Scouts, when they're packing, they know they are done packing, not when they cannot add anything else, but when they cannot take anything else out, right? That's the rule for when you know you're done packing. Here kind of applies the same. Try to make that structure as flat as you can make it. It's really easy to start adding levels and levels and levels and levels. You might have light theme, and for that device, and the buttons, and then the primary, and then the primary highlighted, right? And you start creating levels and levels and levels. It can grow tall very fast. That sometimes makes things complicated. It's organized and it's nice, but make sure that you don't overdo it, because then finding the right component for the right situation becomes an infinite navigation of a tree structure that becomes really hard for your designers to actually, implement. So try to go as flat as you can. Maybe you have all the different states at the same level for a button, right? And you have your hover and your press states and your disabled states all together at the same level, because there are not that many. There's going to be 3, 4, 5 variations at most, right? So if you keep it, if there are then that many variations of a particular component, keep it on the same level. So that's one of the techniques that you can do to make it as flat as you can, because by nature, as you're organizing things, you're going to go with a very tall structure. So try to fight it. It's going to help along the further ahead. So good. Let's move on then. And let's move on to how to maintain, or tips to maintain a design system, right? You got the little design system. How do you make sure that it's always in a healthy state, right? People are using it and it's in a healthy state. So for that, it's better to get started with defining the information architecture, right? Of all your components. You can make it visual, make a diagram and say, well, this component then inherits into this two, or then inherits into these two, and then it applies to this and this particular devices or this particular views that we're creating, right? So make sure you document that. You take the time you can create another page in your document. You can create maybe a mural or a Miro document where you have all that documented, or you can use Notion for that, whatever you prefer. But the important thing is that you define that structure, you make it visual so that it's explainable and self-explainable, because further down the line, when you take a look, or when a new designer joins in, it's going to be a lot easier to understand. So not only set rules, but set scalable rules. Make sure that those rules can evolve over time and can have a pattern, well, when this changes and when we have this other set of elements, right? This rule can be modified this and this other way, right? So for example, that's when you're creating color variables, make sure you have defined different shades, darker shades, lighter shades of that color, because then you might need to create a banner. And that banner, you need to have a dark background because you're going to use a light text color, but you want to have your primary brand color. And your primary brand color might be a little bit too light. Okay, then pick the darker shade now. It's the same rule. The rule was, my primary color is this one, but now I have a little bit of wiggle room to play around and to modify it as the requirements come along, right? So document that structure, document those rules and what are the expected behaviors and where things are flexible and where they are not, right? All right, then you created all these set of rules. You have a little constitution on your own design system. Well, respect it. In order to create a consistent experience for your users, you want to make sure that the buttons look the same across the board, that the primary actions look the same across the board, that the secondary actions that you don't want to be highlight, have a style that actually leans into that. So, and they should be the same across the board, right? If I have a red button to get started and a red button for checkout, that red button should be for pay as well. I don't think red might be a good idea there, but I'm drifting out. So consistency is the key, right? Make sure that the design system rules are simple, are easy to follow, and it's okay to revisit them. It's okay to, go and see, oh, we didn't think of this use case, right? So how do we handle this? But try to do it as seldom as possible. Do it every now and then and set maybe even rules for that. Like, I will do it every quarter or so, but try to do it seldom, because if not, then rules are always changing and it becomes a mess really fast. So respect your rules. Our design tools nowadays make things a lot easier, right? We have smart layout, right? That can help automatically lay things out, right? And flow vertically or horizontally, as much as we want. We have ways to create variations for components. We have ways to have, manage the colors and the styles separately. We have ways to have a quick overview of everything. So use that. You have those tools at your hand. Use them, because the more you use them, the easier it's going to be to manage the different results, right? So use your styles and color variables for keeping those colors and different styles separated, right? That's going to make changing those a breeze in the future, right? And if you need to update a UI element, if you're using symbols, it's going to be a lot faster. So use the tools and the features that, Sketch or whatever tool you're using are providing for you, and try to learn them and go in depth so you can make the best of it. That's why you're getting that app, right? Great. So then managing overrides, right? I have a little screenshot here that I wanted to share. So in Sketch, we have something that I think is really powerful. Part of creating and defining those rules is that you want to manage what can be changed, right? So we have a little component here, this little car with a profile picture, right? And you should be able to decide, like, well, I don't want them to change the color of the name, or I don't want them to change the color of the stars, right? Or I don't want them to change the font. So for that, every element that you have inside of there and on that symbol that you created, you will be able to manage those overrides. And you can select and deselect, right? So for example, for the currency symbol there, you can select, well, they can change the text value, they can change the alignment, they can change the decoration of the text or the font size or the weight, right? So if you unmark, like, I don't want them to change the text value, or I don't want them to change the text alignment, then that option is not going to be available when you insert an instance of that component. That means following the rules is easy. I don't even have the option to change it and to break it. So make sure that you go through that and manage those overrides right, and you're going to have a much easier time, and your designers are going to have a much easier time doing things right and getting things right at the first try, right? So that's something that's really useful when it comes to, managing and maintaining a design system. All right, moving on. We have how to scale a design system, right? So you have your product, it's going well. You created a design system, is healthy, people are using it, people are enjoying it, they are not going around it, but they're actually, using it as a tool and making their lives easier and faster. But now you have a ton of new feature requests, you have to create a ton of new screens, a ton of new flows. How do we scale that design system, right? Your team is growing, right? You're hiring new designers, and now they're doing a mess. So how do we do it? The first thing, and I think is probably the golden rule on this. Well, there are two golden rules, but the first one is that I would recommend is establish a design system council. Gather your knights in a perfectly elliptical table and sit down every now and then, once a quarter, once a month, once a week, if you're crazy, and sit down and explain things and decide how these new components, how these new flows are going to be brought in into the design system, right? It's the moment to analyze the rules and see the rules that you have created and see, do they still apply, right? So regardless of size, this can be you and the founder, right? This can be you and the CTO. The point here is that what elements should be, added, removed, what should be joined together, right? What should be modified. That set up a time to have that conversation so that everybody aligns and that everybody's in the same page, right? So make sure that you set up consistent principles, make sure that you consider the evolution and the scalability of the components and the flows that you're creating, right? And bring all different stakeholders as well. Bring front-end developers, bring someone from marketing, bring someone from business, so that, that those inputs, as they are there, is going to help understand your audience better, and it's going to help bring subtleties and changes into the design system that is going to make the product better. So include everybody, set up, get some pizza, get some, I don't know, healthy greens, whatever you eat, and, create a little ritual. These rituals or procedures, of course, are up to you, but having a design system council is a really helpful practice. So yeah, make sure you have one. Now, while you're at it, right, I was very adamant that you have to follow the rules and create a constitution and be really strict. But you know what? Revisit them as well. Every now and then, every quarter, every 6 months, once a year, however you prefer. Those rules might not apply. Your product might, might be different now, might scale differently now. So it's time to take a look at the rules, see if they still apply, revisit them, modify them. And in the end, we never get it perfect at the first try, right? So iteration is the golden rule of design. No design is ever perfect. It's only going to be iterated more and more. So make sure you iterate also on the rules on your design system and make room for creativity, right? Make space for it. If you don't allow crazy ideas to jump in, then it becomes really dull and boring to create designs. You have to be consistent for sure. But if you don't bring anything new that brings some spark, then you're missing a lot, right? So yeah, revisit those rules every now and then. I have a raised hand from Chris. I don't know if you want to ask your question right now or if you want to put it in the chat maybe.
Okay, I will.
Yeah. All right, perfect. Thank you, Chris. All right, so moving on. We're almost done anyway. One little tip, and this is kind of a sketch thing as well. We have this little functionality that I think it's amazing and doesn't get the importance that it should, which is starring versions. Well, as you are creating and editing a file, you'll start creating versions every time you save. If you're an insane person like me, you're creating a ton of versions every time you save. So let's say you're working in a library that, you're design system manager of your company. You're working in that library. You're an insane person like me, and you're constantly saving. And, your team of 10 designers are working in that, using that library to create the components, right? And then you start saving, and they start getting notifications. There are new components. There is an update in your library. There is an update in your library every single time. It's annoying, and it's going to make everybody's lives a pain. So we created this little option of starting a version. And once you start a version, that version becomes like the production-ready version of that library, of that file. So if you have a guest, if you have someone that you have invited to view the document, they're going to see that version, not the latest version that you're working on. And if someone is using the document as a library, they're only going to get the latest start version. So you can keep working and making changes, and those modifications, nobody finds out. Once you're ready to push those changes so that everybody gets them, start that last version. It becomes a new one, add a little description so you can tell everybody what changed. And boom, everybody gets the update with everything all together. Really, really useful, and makes managing and growing and scaling a design system a lot better. So, well, a final conclusion here is that well-managed design system is definitely a priceless tool for your design and your dev teams, and your marketing teams, and your business teams as well. So go and make that design system better. But I'm pretty sure you already forgot half of what I said. So I made a little help. Here it is. You have a summary of everything. Take a screenshot right now. Save your time. Define the dimensions of your design system. Define what approach and what structure you're going to have, right? If you're going to have atomic design or BEM or whatever it is. Keep it as flat as you can. Make sure that you use nested symbols. They are your friends, but as good friends, don't abuse them because they can clog up the memory a lot. So be mindful on, not nesting over a lot. And establish a design system council where everybody meets, right? Over coffee, over pizza, over whatever, and define those set rules. Manage your overrides. Try to go and organize your design system device agnostic. Make sure you start those versions. Make sure you document everything. And, those couple of extra rules there. Bottoms up, start with tokens, grow to atoms, grow to molecules, go to those organisms, and finally templates, right? Then make sure that you're using symbols for the UI elements that you're going to reuse. styles for the look and feel of the different components or the different elements that you're going to reuse, smart layout to define spacing rules, and make sure you enforce those overrides. Make sure you create an architecture that use styles whenever you're possible, respect the rules to ensure that consistency, iterate, revisit, question those rules, and finally leave some space for creativity, because that's in the end what we're doing, right? We're designers. So good. I think from there, I can move on. Let me see if I have here. This guy doesn't let me move to the next one. So thank you. I am Jaime, design advocate at Sketch. You can contact me at jaime@sketch.com if you have any questions. But you know what? Let's jump into the chat and see what everybody's been asking, right? We have a couple of questions here. So let's take a look. All right. So any tips on learnings on how to make sure you have parity with the design system in the design tool and the live components that engineers use? For example, our engineer teams uses React and a Storybook for their coded component library. How do we make sure that we have constant parity between what our design file is and what's in the live code? That's a challenge for sure. And what I will say there is that there are, in the case of Sketch, there is a Sketch to React. It's a plugin that makes sure you kind of have a little sync between Storybook and creating React components for your different Sketch libraries, right? So that's a good way of making sure that, or at least bridging that gap, right? But the other is the meetings and communication, right? Make sure that as you create start versions, right? I think it's a good practice to say, hey, dev team, make sure you have the latest updated components on the latest start version. Make sure to take a look at what's been changed, and let's make those updates, right, into the different React components that we may have. So by doing it on star versions, you make the process a little bit easier. You give them time to update things and keeps everybody in sync. I think that's going to help. I hope that answers the question a little bit. It is a challenge, and every company tackles it differently. But it's, that's my suggestion, at least. All right. Regarding design systems in general, not restricted to Sketch. That's good. Would you please address the content system portion of a design system? That question popped out yesterday as well. And that is kind of a challenge. I will talk a little bit about Sketch because it's what I know, because in a Sketch, we have a way to import external data with JSON. So you can bring the content from wherever, right into your Sketch file. A tool like that is really useful. The point here is that, this is something I've been asking the team to build. We don't have it yet, but a way to creating like text variables or content variables, so that then your content team can create whatever, paragraph and demo text and whatever is needed. And then you can just immediately load it up, right? Or they can update them themselves, right, from the app. That's something that's not there yet, but I would love to have, but, it's still a conversation. But, regarding best practices, it's, again, time to bridge the gap. Make sure that your content or your demo content, as you're creating designs, right, the wording, the UX copywriting is really important. So make sure that you're writing, you're talking with them. You might have a file where you can keep things think up, like a series of text strings that needs to be updated, and you can get those strings and again maybe export it in a JSON file and bring it in automatically, or you can do it yourself. Not easy, might be more manual, but it's definitely an area that we do get a lot of requests, so it's something that we might explore.
Excuse me, Jaime. May I clarify? I appreciate that.
Go ahead.
It's great for the future feature about bringing it in, but I'm talking about a reference. So the design system reference document. So my understanding is this: the current Salesforce.com design system has this in there. Example I'm talking about. I'm not talking about text strings. I'm talking about guiding parameters for the proper text to use in various situations, such as examples. So in this scenario, you would use this type of example. And so, I'm learning because I'm biased. I'm a UX writer. And we're interested in the content portion of all the great things you're talking about, the other the part that a lot of the designers don't want to deal with, right? But that's our thing, is the content.
Yes.
And so that was my question to you. By the way, phenomenal suggestions you made. There are many correlations, but I was just bringing up the general point about best practices around recording that. For other folks listening, there is a tool called writer.com. It's an AI tool. And it has a lot. You folks at Sketch may want to talk with them, because I think they're working on like developing the style guide. There might be hooks in the code you could have for this sort of thing. So there might be some very exciting future AI tie-ins to this. I wanted to raise that point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And honestly, that's a missing step, right? Working with copywriters, it's still very manual, right? And we don't document enough about how content should be written, what kind of, a style of phrasing should we have when you're creating a dialogue, when you're creating a confirmation or a rejection message, right? And those rules definitely should be there. And you should make a space in your design system documentation for, writing style and guide, a little guide on how to create content. There are best practices on this for sure. But we definitely should integrate it more. And you know what? I'll take this as feedback as well to bring it back to our team.
Thank you so much. I saw an example, a quick point, where there's a template situation for, let's say, a dialog box. So it just has a blue box, and it has here's what you put here. It's not saying that's the design. It's saying this is the appropriate text to put here. This is the appropriate text to put there. And then for every type of design element, you could have a corresponding block like this that shows the parameters for the content input, not saying anything about what design should be used, but it's a corollary to every design system element.
Yeah, every bit of documentation that that I think I ever read outside design, there's always a nice example that tells you how to apply variables, right? And how to apply the different rules that you're reading about, and how does this look in real life, right? And I think that should be there, definitely. And in the case of any design tool, you can create an extra page besides your symbols and components and styles, and so you can create an extra page where you're making those examples. This is how it's supposed to look. This is what the kind of content that should go here, right? This is the style of messaging that should go in this particular type of dialogues or those kind of things. So it's something that can be definitely done. It takes a little bit of extra work, but it's definitely recommended, especially if you have a big team.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your input.
No problem. Thank you, Chris. All right. I don't know if we have time for, we have a couple of questions, but I don't know if we have time for those. Michelle, do I have time?
Oh,